Well, thank you so much, Lance. Thanks to everybody for joining. I see a lot of friendly faces out there, and is everything okay, Bethany? Okay. All right. So I'm just looking at everybody on the screen. So anyway, thanks so much for joining, and we appreciate you joining, especially on such short notice. It's good to see everybody. Happy New Year. Happy 2022. So you got this executive order about 24 hours after we heard about this executive order. So we're all adjusting and responding at about the same pace. However, we've gone through it as an executive team. We've had an opportunity to talk with our human resources director here at Workforce Services, Armand Drummond, and we've invited him today to go over this in depth. And why we think this is important is even though the executive order is pretty specific, the documents that we emailed out are pretty well versed in how this will work. We don't have a lot of procedures to add as a department, but we do think that sometimes it helps to just be able to ask questions and bounce things around and see if this is going to work for you, your team, if you're a supervisor or manager, how you would go about approving an employee, any questions that you might have to make this successful, the timing on your team, workload, and those kinds of things that you might need to balance. So we're really excited about it. If you have kids in school, maybe you've heard of some of the challenges with teachers not being there because of COVID or burnout or other issues, or maybe just workforce shortages. We're very familiar with that here with such a great economy and at our own department. So we know that this is needed, and it's really important that our kids get a good education, and we're excited about the solution that the governor's come up with. We support it. We think it's really innovative. I know lots of states are doing different things to solve this and to give state employees an opportunity. If you've never been in a school classroom, I guarantee you it will be quite the experience. I used to volunteer in my son's 6th grade classroom, and I went every month to teach a class for the entire year. And I'm telling you, you learn more about kids, their struggles, their successes, what the culture is, kind of some of the ins and outs of the school than you'll ever learn. So I think it's a great opportunity. I also think, if you're into service and that's something that you like to do for your community, this is a great way to be there. If you're burned out in your current job and you just want some time away, we'll give you 30 hours of administrative leave to go do that, and then you'll make a little bit of extra money at the school district. So I see lots of benefits to this. There might be some downsides for some of us, and so we can talk through some of those and weigh those. But I certainly think it's a great opportunity for us to support our teachers here in Utah. So with that said, we're going to kick this off over to Armand, who's our human resource director. He's going to go over the details of the documents we emailed out. And then our deputy director, Greg Paris, is going to lead us after that through some Q&As and some additional parameters that we've discussed as a department. So Armand, you're up.
Well, thank you, Casey. I appreciate it. So as Casey had mentioned, this executive order was signed by the governor on January 31st. So it is in effect currently. And what we're trying to address here is staffing shortages that have been occurring at the schools that are making it difficult in some cases for the schools to remain open. And a really high priority of the governor's office and his administration is to keep kids in school, both for the quality of the education that they receive and also because this helps to keep parents at work. So just a quick little side note for you, the executive branch of Utah has over 22,000 employees. And each of them are uniquely committed to the respective communities where they live. And so there really is a lot of capacity here to help with this issue. So the executive order itself, if you've read through it, it stipulates that agency employees shall be informed of this order. We've sent that out, and then through this meeting, we're also accomplishing that requirement, and we're also providing some of the additional clarification that is established there. So let me just walk through a couple of the things. I'm assuming you've read through the documents themselves, but just to highlight some of the things that we need to make sure everybody's understanding. Accompanying the executive order itself were 2 resources that provide the framework for deploying this program across all agencies. That's the leader guide and the employee guide. We're not going to go through every part of those documents, but we want to highlight some of the most important things and then give you some DWS specific guidance. So first off, this program is only available to benefits eligible employees. If you are a part-time employee and you are also benefits eligible, then you are also still eligible for this program on a prorated basis. The question might be, how do I know if I'm benefits eligible? The simplest way to answer that is to say, if you accrue sick and annual leave each pay period, then you are benefits eligible. If you do not accrue sick and annual leave during the pay periods, then you are not benefits eligible. Also, probationary staff who are meeting expected levels of performance and who are not actively involved in core training series progressions are eligible to participate in this program. That being said, this is not a universal right, a guaranteed benefit, or a promised opportunity to everyone. If you want to participate in this program, you need to request and receive individualized approval from your leadership. And Greg's going to speak a little bit more about what that looks like in a minute here. The key provision here, though, is that the core work of the agency is the primary importance. So while participation in this program is strongly encouraged, agency leadership does reserve the right to decline to grant permission or to remove permissions previously granted at any time and for any reason. If you do participate in this program, you do need to complete a conflict of interest form on the DWS intranet. It's just the same process you all currently follow for any other form of secondary employment. And we're not going to make any changes here. So if you participate, you need to do a conflict of interest form. So with this executive order, employees may be granted up to 30 hours of administrative leave to participate. We anticipate that a few hours, maybe up to 6, are going to be needed for onboarding, leaving approximately 24 hours or roughly 3 all-day shifts to support the schools. What do I mean by onboarding? Well, when approved to participate, and that's the first part, you got to be approved to participate, you would then be responsible to apply with the local education agency of your choice. This can be any public, private, or charter school system in the state. And remember, as we go through this process, that the local education agency will make their own hiring decisions. So we're not going to take part in any portion of that. You may have to complete their background check process. The school district may have provision to waive or pay for the fees associated with that background check. If they don't, then you will be responsible for covering those costs yourself. You all know that as part of your employment at DWS, you went through a federal fingerprint background check. Unfortunately, we cannot share the information from those background checks with any other entity. And so even though you've already done one, if you participate in this program, you likely will have to do one again for the schools. And then you may need to complete some type of training before entering the classroom or performing other duties, you know, what to do as a substitute, what not to do, those kinds of things. We anticipate that those things combined might be that first 6 hours and then 24 remaining to give you 3 days in the classroom, as it were. This is really important. I need to really emphasize this particular principle really seriously here. When you participate in this program and you are working at the schools, you may not do any state work related matters while you are at the school. That means that while you are substituting in whatever capacity, you may not check your emails, you may not make phone calls, you may not send any instant messages or texts related to your work at the state. There has to be a very clear division of work done for the state and work done for the schools. This is due to state risk insurance requirements and then also to avoid any FLSA issues, but that's just super important. You've got to have those very clearly delineated. When you participate, employees need to notify their direct supervisor of the days that they are being asked to substitute. We expect that those changes to the schedule will be accomplished through the normal call-off procedures that are already in place. With the caveat that we may also, you also will need to communicate with anybody who may be impacted on days when you would be working as a substitute. Like I said before, when you're working at the schools, you must not conduct any state-related business. So your supervisor and possibly others with whom you need to work must understand that during that period of time, you will be entirely unreachable. Sometimes the schools don't get a whole lot of notice, right? Teacher wakes up in the morning, she feels sick, she calls off. The school has to figure out a substitute right on the moment, and so there's not a lot of notice for them. While we recognize that the schools sometimes are able to provide only very minimal notice of the need for substitute coverage, we still require that employees discuss with their supervisor and receive specific approval before accepting any same-day assignment. And in those scenarios, the supervisor does have the right to say no to that day of substituting. Now, that being said, if you're a supervisor, don't make the decision arbitrarily. There needs to be a good reason to say no. But if you have scheduled meetings, trainings, looming deadlines, work that's pressing, you can say no in those circumstances. And then one other provision here is that when you're substituting, travel time to and from the school or the district offices or wherever it is you need to travel to take care of that substitute responsibility is not considered work time at the state, and it will not be compensated. So let's walk through just a few of the mechanics of participation for this program. If you're selected to participate, and again, remember, the hiring decisions are the sole discretion of the local education agency. So if you are not hired by them, then you can't participate. But assuming that you are hired and you are participating, you will record your time as OA leave on your timesheet in ESS. You then need to double click on that time entry and enter the comment of substitute. This is the same process you already use for other types of comments. It should be familiar to most of you, but if it's not, get some assistance. Talk to your supervisor, call someone on my staff, get some help from a coworker, whatever you need to do, but you need to make sure that you enter that time correctly using OA as the code and then putting in a comment of substitute. Supervisors, and by that I mean anybody who approves time in ESS for other individuals, you must check to ensure that this coding and the comment have been recorded correctly. If it's not, you need to not approve the time. You need to send it back to the employee to correct it. You must also track the hours that you approve for each employee to ensure that in total, they do not receive more than the allowed 30 hours of OA leave. For those participating, you are allowed to claim both the OA leave and whatever compensation is provided by the local education agency for your time as a substitute. Just a helpful small hint, local education agencies have differing rates of pay. So if you live close to more than one, you might want to do a little bit of research to find out who provides the best substitute teacher compensation before you go through the process. But you do get to claim both. The OA leave and the leave for or the pay for working as a substitute. You get both. A couple other very important provisions that I need to mention. There are some special circumstances associated with the Utah State or with the Utah schools for the deaf and blind. It relates primarily to dual employment considerations. So anyone who wishes to participate at a USDB site must forego the substitute teacher wages and can only take the approved OA leave or use their own annual comp or excess leave if that's appropriate. But if you're doing it for USDB, you cannot take both. If you have questions about that specific scenario that you would like to walk through, please just contact me directly and we'll discuss that offline. This program will run through June 30th of 2022. The OA leave that's associated with this program will not carry into the next fiscal year. So you've got to take care of it by June 30th. And then the last little quick provision is that this program is only available for schools physically located in the state of Utah. If the school that you wanted to substitute for is located in another state, it is not eligible. Last thing for me is, if you are interested in the program, please start the process by completing the form that is linked on the employee guide that you were sent. It's at the very top of page 3. It says, if you're interested, please fill out this form. And the word form is a hyperlink that will take you to the survey. It just goes to a really quick, simple 2-question survey, but completion of that survey is mandatory for participation because it's being used by the governor's office to track both interest and participation. So with that, Greg, over to you.
Thanks, Armand. This is a really cool option put forth by the governor. We are very much aware here at DWS what the all hands on deck concept can achieve. We've been living it ourselves for the past 2 years. A number of the things I'm going to review with you, Armand and I had a discussion this morning, and some of it's going to be repetitive, and that's by design. We want to just reiterate some of the key points that you've heard and you've read. We want to make sure that we're saying the same thing so that you can review it again with your staff. Again, the program runs through the end of June, doesn't go into the next fiscal year. It is for full and part-time employees. We had some conversation around probationary staff, and we don't want to exclude them from the opportunity, but we do want to make sure they're not involved in any kind of structured core training. Some divisions have for example, an 8-week core structured training. If that's in the middle of its progress, we're going to talk about timing in a moment. We wouldn't want any kind of substitute teaching to occur in the middle of that cycle. The support is only for schools that are located in Utah, and the specific steps, as Armand said, the completing the form online. We're going to talk a little bit here in a moment about working with the supervisor to get approval. You'll have to apply with the LEA. You have to go through the background check. We are aware that some school districts may have a process to waive the background check fees, but we don't have any information as to how that will work or which school district. So again, we just advise you and your staff to take whatever individual research opportunities exist for the districts or the charter schools that you're interested in researching. And then you'll have to complete the conflict of interest. It's the same process you would for any other conflict of interest, and the same approval process will be held to get it all the way through from beginning till end. You will be compensated with OA leave plus whatever the school district's wages are. And again, our understanding, and from our quick review, school districts do have differing reimbursement rates. I believe approximately this time next year, you'll get a W-2 from any school district in which service is performed. The one exception, as Armand said, would be the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. And I would encourage any specific questions to be directed specifically to Armand so that he can help explain the difference between secondary employment and dual employment. It's kind of a complicated process to explain. Again, so getting started, fill out the online questionnaire, the 2 questions. Will you participate in the state school program? Binary answer, yes, no. And how many days do you plan on working in the schools under this program? And it's a radio button, 1, 2, or 3. As you heard Armand mention, and as is articulated in the resource materials, agencies will identify any additional conditions that are unique to the agency. DWS has been at the forefront of the pandemic, and we've gotten through the challenges by working together. So we know this will work. We support the governor, we support the executive order concept, but we also want to make sure in doing this that we do not create adverse impacts for ourselves, for the communities, for our staff. So to that end, if you're interested in participating, we're going to be looking at a few additional factors. Performance always comes up, and we don't have very, very clearly articulated lines drawn around performance. So the conversation we want to have today, are there any performance-related concerns on the part of the employee? This could involve meeting core expectations. This could be professional expectations, punctuality, or attendance. If an employee is currently involved in, some divisions use this term, I'm sorry if it's not universally understood, targeted support or mentoring. If you're having greater intervention to help an employee overcome some current obstacles, taking them away at this time may not be the best approach for each individual person. And we'll dive into timing here in a moment, but we don't want to say if you've had a written letter of warning in the last 19 years, you're disqualified, or conversely say, if you've been on a PIP at any point in your exposure to at workforce services, you're disqualified. We're talking about the here and now. So if you're actively having conversations with an employee to address a concern, this may not be the right activity at this point in time. From today till June 30 is approximately 150 days. So over the course of the next 150 days, there may be a better time for participation in the substitute teaching activity. And even though we're calling it substitute teaching, it's my understanding school districts also have needs or may have needs for things if you've got the credentials like bus driving or cafeteria worker or school crossing guard. So when you apply at an LEA, you may be selected to perform whatever is needed for that local education agency. Workload. In addition to the individual performance concerns, we're also suggesting that you dive deeply into the current workload of the individual, the team, the unit, the division. If you have excess capacity amongst certain staff, there may be things that you can redirect your current staff to do to help your, again, team, unit, division, to help the entire unit get to a better spot before we branch out in mass externally. Another workload consideration, can your team absorb and cover for the absences? You may have a small team, upfront staff in an employment center, and while you can absorb it, you can't absorb it all on the same day. So you may have everybody's interested in participating, but you'll have to balance who can be out and participate on any given day. Anybody who participates in the program, there are not workload modifications, so we don't adjust work accordingly. And by that, we don't reduce caseload. You're expected to maintain whatever your current full workload responsibilities may be. I mentioned timing. The timing may not be the best right now. For example, we were talking here with the executive directors team, the legislative session going on for another few glorious days. It's not probably a good fit for us to do this until at least at the earliest, the middle of March. You may have specific timing complications that you need to get over, be it workload, be it you're trying to get a grant out, you're having an influx of work, for example. Just know that we have now into the end of June for participation. So if the opportunity doesn't arise just yet, work with your team to see how they can take advantage of the opportunity prior to June. As you heard Armand say, one of the things that you'll want to be very clear about with your staff, and that is substitute teaching isn't super scheduled. It's not super clear. You don't have a well-defined calendar where you know that right now you will be covering next Thursday and 2 Tuesdays afterward. And many times it's the morning of. So you'll want to be very clear with your staff member what the expectation will be in terms of getting pre-approval, and that they should get that pre-approval prior to accepting with the LEA. Finally, in terms of the requests, supervisors should be reviewing the requests themselves with the staff member who's interested in participating, but they should also be staffing it with the next level up for them, so that we have 2 sets of lenses on each request. It also helps with consistency. And I want to be really clear, if I'm not saying it, I want to say it as clearly as possible. Our goal in supporting this is we want to screen people into participation and not out of participation. So if there are questions with that, you could reach out to any of the division directors, any of us here in the executive director's office, and we want to make sure that we are being consistent across the entire department. And with that, Lance, do you have any questions that are queued up for us to try to address right up front?
Yeah, let's start with this question. Excuse me. Do employees need to provide documentation back to DWS, to the agency, proving their attendance or the services that they performed at the various districts?
Armand and I had a conversation today about a similar concept.
They're looking at each other.
We were actually anticipating a similar question as this. At this point, this is a service-centric approach to helping. If you have enough trust in your employee that you entrust them with DWS workload and they come to you and say they're participating to support their communities, to support their schools, our expectation that is they're a high-performing employee and you need not have them bring you back a note from the principal. Armand, anything else you want to add to that?
No. Do I want to? No. Let me just say, if you had the occasion where you found out that a person had not engaged in that trust, then we should talk. And we will address the specifics of that circumstance and then decide what the appropriate action would be going forward. But we're hoping not to need that process.
Lance, I think the specific example we got into is not all substitute shifts are likely they don't all equate to 8-hour shifts.
Right.
So if we know that and an employee were to put 8 hours of OA on their timesheet, that's, I think, where Armand is going, where we may need to have a conversation with that particular employee. If it's a half-day substitute shift for OA leave and a half day they come back to the office, or a half day of claiming annual, that's a different conversation. That's above board.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and go to Dale Omby. He has his hand raised.
Thanks, Lance. I had a question, like, what happens if a person is working 410s and they work their 40 hours and then they work as a substitute on their day off? So they have 50 hours of pay.
So they wouldn't be able to participate in this program under those specific circumstances because they've already got 40 hours of pay in the week. And you can't have 40 hours of pay for the week plus leave time. So in that case, the employee would need to have done a conflict of interest form because they have secondary employment. And it would be done on a day when they're already gone. And so there is no leave to be attached to that. So if you're not actually leaving your regular work tasks, then the OA leave doesn't apply to you because you wouldn't have been working then anyway. So this is, in that case, that 4 10-hour day person would need to be working on one of the 4 days at a substitute position that they would normally have been working in your office to use the OA leave.
Got it. Thanks.
Great. You mentioned, Armand, you mentioned conflict of interest. Jeff Christensen is asking, in regards to the conflict of interest form, do we need to wait until that is approved or accepted before we can substitute, or are they going to automatically be approved?
Us not knowing specific to Jeff's circumstances, I don't know if he's already pre-approved as a substitute teacher, but the background check process, just as a reminder with the LEA, that is not necessarily something that is going to take 15 minutes to do. We see it ourselves with our own employees. There is some time elapsing to get background checks through. So if Jeff, specifically, if you or your staff are interested, I would suggest that you work on both paths concurrently. But I guess to answer your question, my recommendation is that the conflict of interest is fully vetted and signed before you begin this practice, recognizing that we still have through June 30 of 2022 to access the full 30 hours. Armand?
Agreed.
Next question, do we email our supervisor and manager to seek initial approval to participate?
Sure, or contact them in whatever other form you'd like. Like, you just need to have that conversation with them. An email is nice because there's some documentation attached to it, but if you just wanted to stop by their office or give them a phone call and talk about your interests, that would be perfectly fine.
Great. Next question, can the 30 hours only be used if hired as a substitute, or can it be used for volunteer time as well?
So if the position that you're looking for, I think Amanda McPeck, our department's general counsel, had asked this question of me the other day. Said there are some critical needs for people to do things like proctor tests at her school, and they're not a paid position, it's a volunteer position. She was asking, is that okay? Absolutely. If it's a critical need for the school and you're serving that critical need, then, and it's just an unpaid position for them, that certainly is acceptable in the context of this program. You're just going to get the OA leave and not the additional substitute pay because there is none. But yes, that would be perfectly acceptable.
If the question though is tied, if Thomas, if you're asking, can I use it for ancillary volunteer work? I believe today the spirit of what we're speaking to refers to assisting the critical need with the schools, the LEAs.
Okay, great. If any of these questions, we answer them and then you have clarifying questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Dustin Townsend says, for the school district that he's in, the training is about 4 to 6 hours of online completion, requires 4 to 6 hours. Can that be done during work hours in the office?
That's a definite no. That goes back to the principle I was talking about before. We have to have a very clear delineation between when you're doing work for the school and when you're doing work for the state. So when you're doing anything for the schools, you cannot be doing anything state work related. That includes sitting in your office and garnering work time to do those trainings. There has to be a 100% complete separation from the two employment relationships.
But to clarify, Armand, you can use OA for that 4 to 6 hours.
Yes.
To do the training.
You can. You just don't do it at work.
Yeah. Okay, great. So next question, when the 30 hours of OA for this has been used, and if someone wants to continue to substitute teach, annual cannot be used for additional subbing due to normal conflict of interest expectations with secondary work to occur outside normal assigned business working hours, i.e. correct? So could someone continue to substitute and request filling out a conflict of interest and just use their own personal leave to do that?
Lance, real quick, the second, isn't there a subsequent question after that from Ryan as well?
That was from Zach.
Okay, but
So right after that is a similar question.
Oh, yeah. Ryan's is really similar, yeah.
So go ahead, Armand. Yeah,
the executive order itself and the documents supporting that, if you've read through those, there's an element in there that talks about with appropriate agency approvals, an employee could use annual excess and comp leave to continue participation. It's just that they would get no more OA. At this particular stage, DWS leadership has not made a decision as to whether that kind of approval will be granted. Right now, we're just looking at the 30 hours of OA leave that are established in the executive order. We'll see how that pans out, how that affects the agency, and then make a decision as to whether or not employees will be allowed to continue that using their own leave at a later time. So for right now, just the OA. When we get to the point when somebody's exceeding that and they're ready to maybe go into further use, then let's have a chat there. But right now, we have not made that decision.
Great. Next question, what if we provide other paid work for the school besides substitute teaching? Could we use the 30 hours of OA?
So the way that the executive order is written, it's designed to be quite broad. It does not have to be a substitute teacher. It could be other things like school, like bus driver, cafeteria worker, and then there's this catch-all of other support services position. So as long as it's a position within the school that is occurring really during the school hours, because this whole program is intended to help keep the schools open and the kids going to them during the school day. As long as it fits within that category and it's something that the school really needs, it's going to be okay.
Okay, great. Next question. So we clarified that the training cannot be done on work time. Could an employee use state issued equipment to complete the training while they're off work? So if they have they're a teleworker, could they use their state equipment to complete the training, even if they're off the clock, so to speak?
So I'm going to answer this, but with the caveat that Greg or Kevin or Casey or Nate or anybody can jump in and counter my answer at any point here. The DTS policies for state issued equipment do allow for some incidental personal use. So I would say probably it is okay. But if the agency wants to decide differently, they certainly have the authority to do that.
Lance, I think if we sit here quietly enough, that means we're just going to let Armand be on the hook for this response.
I figured.
I figured that.
It's all right. It's recorded. We've got it. He's on the hook for that one. Great. So that's we're up to date on questions, and we're nearing time. Are there any final questions? You can raise a hand or you can throw it into the chat. Got another one. Many districts utilize an automated sub call out system. A sub often needs to accept or deny the position at the time of the call. How do we navigate day of substitution if employees need approval prior to accepting? So walk us through that a little bit more.
If you're in a position where the system that the school has mandates that you say yes or no at the very moment that they call, then quite frankly, you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to say no to that, because we do expect that you check with your supervisor and make sure that on a day of situation, you're not going to be missed. Now, if you've discuss that with your supervisor, maybe, and said, hey, in the next 3 days, is it going to be okay? And they've said, yeah, the next 3 days, not a problem for us. Then you might be able to do it, but you have to have approval specific to that day prior to accepting at the school. So if it's a question of, well, they have to have an answer immediately, then you're going to have to default to an answer of no.
Great. Question, maybe clarification. So if you're asked to substitute or do other work for the school that's less than 8 hours in a given day, then is the expectation that you return to work for the state, or do you use your own leave to cover the rest of the day?
Either or both. If you're working 4 hours at the school, then you're entitled to 4 hours of OA, not more than that. Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't make sense for you to come back to school, to the work, to state work at that day, and you've pre-approved that with your supervisor, so they're not expecting you, you could potentially use your own leave to cover that remaining time, or return to work and finish off the day if that's what's going to be best.
Yeah, maybe in the case that someone anticipates working 8 hours and the day ends up short for whatever reason at the school, it's probably rare. Just notify your supervisor that the day ended short, plug in the correct hours of time. I'm sure that your supervisor will work with you.
Yeah,
for those remaining hours. Is there another question? Is there a level of expectation of participation by each agency in the state, or better yet, yeah,
like, is there a quota? I think might be a different way to ask that question.
That's one way to ask it, right?
I would say no, but having said that, I guess my personal hope here is that we have 2,000 employees, and recognizing that not all are going to be available or desire to participate. But as we said, clearly our goal is to screen people in who want to participate, have an ability to participate, the workload, the performance allows it to do so. We have a compelling need across the state. This isn't just unique to one geographic area or one grade level, and it's not unique. Although we keep calling it substitute teaching, it is unique to all positions within schools. So I'm hopeful that we have a healthy uptake of this opportunity. But to answer the specific question, at this juncture, there is not a certain level of expectation. I mean, if one of our 4 basic tenets, that of community connection, is how we operate our business, DWS being so embedded in the communities across the state, this should come as second nature for many of our staff.
Okay, very good. Got a couple of other questions. Can the supervisor, of course, this is case by case scenario, but could a supervisor allow the 24 hours of work to be done within 1 week, within the same week, if there's enough coverage or if that person's work allows for it?
Yeah, we're not going to put restrictions on how and when. That's again unique to a team, a supervisor, the work unit, the division, the office, whatever work unit that exists. We just expect workload to be managed, customers to be served, and if 24-hour, if 3 consecutive days works for all involved, then it sounds like it's a win for everyone.
Great. So if someone chooses not to participate, can their hours be donated to another person who wants to commit more?
That is a great question. That level of creativity gets you. That's a great question. Unfortunately, at this point, it is clearly articulated 30 hours per person up through June 30.
Yeah.
But love the creativity. We'll keep that one in our back pocket.
Yeah. Next question. Do we know if the school districts are on board with this order? Interesting question. It seems like a lot of work to onboard and do the fingerprinting just to have an employee only be able to do 30 hours. Great idea.
So this program was screened through the State Board of Education before it was brought out. They screened it with, I wouldn't want to say all the school districts because I have no way of kind of proving that, but they screened it with several school districts and they were all supportive. They all were wanting as much help as they could get. So.
Great. What if the school offers overtime?
The school can offer you anything the school wants to offer you. That's between you and the school. It wouldn't be overtime because technically to be overtime, it's got to be over 40 hours in a week. But if they want to pay you time and a half because you're fulfilling a critical need or they want to pay you anything else, that's between you and the school district.
Okay.
Lance, couple others that just had come to mind that I had been thought of earlier. Just remember that this is for participation in the actual running of the day portion of the school. It's trying to keep schools open. So this program cannot be used for things like helping out with after school programs like coaching or PTA or any of those kinds of things. It has to be keeping the schools open during the day. And then the other thing is some of your kids might be in year-round schools, and it's possible that those year-round schools have class dates that extend beyond June 30th. And if that's the case, you need to get, for the purposes of this program, your substitute teaching done by the end of the program, June 30th. It does not, under any circumstances, extend into the next fiscal year.
Great. Okay, I think we're nearing the end. I'm a little bummed that I can't get paid to chaperone at prom. Thanks, Armand. That's a bummer.
I know.
They got one other question. What about night schools, such as maybe Horizonte as an example?
So again, you could go to Horizonte and get secondary employment to work as a substitute teacher while they're in class, but because your work happens during the day, there isn't a need for leave there. You would have worked your day here. You'd then go and work in your off hours there. And so you'd still need to do the conflict of interest, because it's secondary employment. But this grant of OA leave would not be eligible or would not be applicable to that because there isn't leave attached to it.
It's great.
Thanks, Armin. Thanks for all your help. Lance, thank you so much for proctoring and guiding us, and wonderful questions. Love the creativity. You stumped us on a few. So if we have to come back and issue mea culpas, I'll own the apology for Armin. At this point, we'd like to turn it back over to Casey. I think she has some additional thoughts to share.
Yeah, well, I'm just excited because we had, I think at one point, close to 300 people that joined, and somebody asked about a quota, and I think Greg was spot on. We don't have a quota. We're just wanting to inform you, and if this is a good option for you and the team or office that you work in to go participate, we want to encourage it. We want to make sure you have the right information, and we hope that today has been really helpful. This has been recorded, so if you have staff that work with you that haven't had a chance to view it, they can come back and access this. Of course, they can always reach out to one of us or Armand to get more items clarified. But I just want to say, when I was thinking about this and why I was so excited about it is because I think we have such smart, talented people here at Workforce Services, and we don't always get an opportunity to go and take those talents out into the community and share them with children. And what a great opportunity. You all have different levels of knowledge and programs that you work in, and you see the impacts on our communities. If you're helping people with public assistance or unemployment insurance or getting jobs, or you work in a supporting division, you're doing things to help these families. And so going out and volunteering in these schools and kind of seeing how those kids are doing, how those families are doing, and being able to take some of those talents to benefit them in the classroom, it will probably be a really cool experience. So I'm planning on doing it, not till after the legislative session, like Greg mentioned. And, I've even heard from people that, Dale Ilmby brought this up, what if you want to do it on your day off, if you work a flex schedule? That's great. You can go above and beyond that. That wouldn't qualify for the OA, but it might just be the right opportunity for you to go and do something like this because we know there's such a great need. So I am excited about it. Once I get done with my experience, maybe I'll share it in our monthly newsletter, or if any of the deputies or other directors want to do it, that might be a fun thing to share what our experience was like. So I think Kevin's going to get his CDL license and go drive a bus. That's what we're hoping to hear about. So stay tuned, everybody. But thank you so much for joining. Thank you for caring about the governor's executive order, and I look forward to hearing how this opportunity works out for you all.